Okay, today I'm going to tie a Lunn's particular fly. It's a dry fly which is invented by William Lunn, a river keeper on the River Test. It's you'll see by the wings that this is what we call a spent pattern. The wings are flat out. Spent means when it's laid its eggs and falls dying onto the river. And trout like it because it's an easy fly for them to take. It cannot take off or fly away, and the trout know this, so they leisurely gulp them down. The Lunn's particular is a very old fly, over 100 years old I believe, and it's a well-proven pattern, which is a type of thing I like, being a bit traditional. Okay, I'm going to use a maroon silk. I think the true tie-in calls for crimson. Well, crimson is sort of maroonish. I'm waxing the silk. I've also held the wax up to my lamp to give it a little bit of heat to soften it. That's the situation at the moment. So I'm now going to start the fly. I'll prepare the materials as we go along because it's a reddish brown fly, and the materials mainly come from a Rhode Island red, which is a brown chicken. 3 winds forward, 1, 2, 3, 3 winds back over the same rotation. Our silk is secure there, so we now take it down towards the bend. Ready to tie in the tail. Yeah, Rhode Island red. I've kept chickens. I liked the Rhode Island red before I was a fly fisherman, and I like the light Sussex. But the Rhode Island red is gives some lovely brown feathers, and the old fly tyers liked it. Now, William Lunn, who invented this fly, his theory was that he wanted to use materials that were easily available from normal farmyard fowls. And this is a hackle from a large Rhode Island red neck. So I'm going to use some of these for tails. We'll tear a few off like this. Draw them down to get the tips lined up. Can you see that okay? And tear off a bunch. Now, I quite like a longish tail on this fly because it looks better when on the water. So that's about where I would like it to be. The tail is normally the same length as the body, but on this particular fly, no pun intended, it can be a bit longer. Okay, now I've got the tail on there, and I'm going to cut off the waist stubs. You may have heard me say, don't cut them square, because that just gives you a lump. Cut them where they've got a bit of a taper, at a bit of a sort of an angle. So when they lie flat, they thin out. It doesn't matter too much on this particular fly because of the body that we've got on it. But back to the tail. I want the tail to be splayed out and spread a bit. So I put one wind underneath. Just like that, and that splays the tail nicely. Now we come to the body, and I'm back to my hackle, the big Rhode Island red hackle. We tie this with a stripped hackle stalk. So this is what I'm going to use. I'll just cut off that bit of waste. Now these are nice for tails here, but I'm going to waste them today because I want to give you this demonstration. So what we do is we strip the hackle stalk like this, and we get these off. Get these all off. Pull them down and get rid of them. Both sides. Take them all away. And as these are being torn off, it gives a sort of mottled effect on the stalk, which when it's wound onto the fly gives a sort of a segmented appearance. May not be too clear to see it there, but it is a good body. It doesn't absorb water. We've all heard the saying. It's as light as a feather. Well, this is a feather that we stripped, so it's even lighter. Okay, I'm going to tie this in just like this. I sort of hook it under a bit and tie it in like this. Narrow end, because as we wind up the fly, we taper it. The stalk is wider as we wind it on, which is the effect we want. Okay, I'll just leave my silk hanging there for a moment before I wind on the hackle stalk. Hackle stalks do make a good body and an attractive body. A friend of mine in Hereford uses a black stripped hackle stalk to make nymphs, and he says it's very effective. I've used it on other flies, and larger flies that if I'm tying sea trout flies, and I strip an orange hackle just like I strip this natural coloured one, and you can get some nice flies from it. In fact, this is a Lunn's particular here, which I've tied from a dyed. I don't know if you can see that body. I think it's attractive and I use it, but it's tied with a dyed hackle stalk. We don't dye the stalk, actually we dye the whole feather, but when we use it up, we strip it and we're left with that nice colour. Okay, I'm going to wind this on now, and it should go on in touching turns over that bit of varnish which I've just put on to help to stick it. I'm tying this down, touching turns if I can, and take it up to what I call the thorax area of the fly. The thorax area of a fly is sort of the shoulder area. I like a thorax on some of my dry flies, and I may tie some on this series later on with a thorax. I'm going to put one on this fly, and we get up to this shoulder thorax area, which I would say is about there. So I now get my silk back to where I want it, and I'll secure this stalk with a few winds of the silk. It's a sort of a short body on this fly because it's going to have those spent wings that I mentioned earlier. Right, that's removed the stub, and that is secure. Now, I hope you can see that body. I think it's a very attractive body because it's got that segmented effect. Some people varnish the body, but I think it looks better in a sort of a matte colouring. If you varnish it, it's got a bit of a shine to it, which to me looks a teeny bit unnatural. Okay, now the next item we put on, the wings. And the wings I cut from a hen cape, and I use wing cutters. Now, this is my old wing cutter, which I'll use to demonstrate what they are, because it's got like a razor blade there bent with a little gap. And what you do, you press down on the feather on a surface like that, and you get the stalk of the feather through that little gap. And you do it on a firm surface. I normally use some newspaper or something, because if you put it on a hard surface, you blunt this blade. I've got several sets of wing cutters, and they come in various sizes. I've got these are Benwood's, and I've got some from other companies. This is my old original one, which it's got to be 30 years old. Now, when you press down on the hackle, it'll be cut like this. I'll try to show you this. Can you see that? So what we do, once we've cut it down, we take away this waste, like this. You see the wing in there? if I tear off the waist and we get this wing. Can you see that wing? I'm just going to put it on the bench to cut it off to show you. That is one of the wings. Now on a spent pattern, I cut down one side of that stalk, and I do this for each of the wings, so I'm left with half a size of that wing, and this is how it comes out. I don't know if you can see that cut down there where I've cut off one side. I'll try to show you. This is one that's not being cut, and this is one that's being cut. Okay. You can use Hackle point wings. That's the tip of a Hackle as a wing, but I think these look better somehow. Okay, I'm going to put these on. I've got two of these, and they will sort of move about a bit when I tie them on, but we will reposition them afterwards. Just bear with me, I need to go to the bench a minute to do this. One there, another like that. What I'm actually doing is lining up the tips, and I tie them in back here just like this with a sort of pinch and loop. You can position them like that, give them a good tie down, and I secure these stalks with a few windings down here. Okay, now I'm going to remove these stalks, these spare ones, and put some more winds on the wings. Now the wings don't look very good at the moment, but all will be revealed. You will see I'm trying to tie them down so they lie flattish. Something like that. I've been winding through them and I'm getting that effect. Now I talked earlier about a thorax. I'm going to put a thorax on, which I love using. This is Peacock Herl. It's a well-used, well-proven, very good material. I'm always happy if I've got Peacock Herl in one of my flies. It has some sort of magical effect for trout. Peacock Herl and hare's ear I love very much. I've had a lot of success with it. And I'm going to tie this down now. I'm tying it in between the wings to secure it, and then I'm going to wind it around the wings, in and around, a bit like I did with the silks. This really is not part of the pattern, but I think William Lunn would have used it had he sort of had access to the material. Okay, I'm just tie this off. You notice I didn't put too much of the Peacock Herl, just enough to give a bit of cover. Now the thorax is an important part of this fly, but William Lunn built up the thorax with silk. I think this looks better because it's got that little sort of furriness about it, but we will be winding over that in a moment, but we'll be able to see through the winds, and it does, I feel confident about it. It's certainly better, in my opinion, than silk, but It's up to you. Okay, I'm going to tie in hackle. Again, Rhode Island red hackle, but it's from the rump area of the fly, not the neck. It's from the rump cape rather than a neck cape. The reason I use these, they're usually pretty good quality and they're nice and long, and I can get several flies out of one hackle. Okay, I'll bear the tips to give me some grip. And I will tie this in just like this. I use again a figure of 8 if I can to get it tied down. Now I'm going to bend this hackle stalk back just to doubly secure it. You can see by these wings that they are durable because I can bend them about a bit. Can you see that little stalk of the hackle? I'm going to remove that. Okay, get ready to wind the hackle. Take my silk towards the front, and I'm going to put some winds behind the wings like this. I give at least 2, maybe 3. I decide as I go along, I will give it 3. That's behind. Now I come up underneath and I wind a few in front. Probably 3 in front, 3 behind. A bit like that. Okay, I've got to now secure this hackle until I can cut it off. You can see what I mean by the hackle. I've got enough to tie another fly at least out of that one. Right, I'll nip it off, I'll go down in there. When you cut a hackle, keep your scissors closed till you get in there. Nip it off like that. Now, I've now got to secure this hackle even more and the rest of the fly, and I do this by just drawing everything back like this. Now these wings will stand this because they're durable. I'll put a whip finish on in a moment. Before I do that, I get my varnish ready to dip my needle in for when I draw up the whip finish. I dip the needle in. I'll show you that in a moment. I tend to do a whip finish this way. I recommend you get a whip finish tool because this took a little bit of learning for me. I had to learn it out of a book, out of Vineyard's book, and I found it a bit difficult. So, okay, I've given it 3 winds. Now I'm going to dip my needle in to the varnish. I put it in the loop, I keep in tension, and I draw it up. If I didn't use the needle, it would go into a knot. It would all sort of swirl up. Right, I'm still going to put some varnish on the head in a moment. But first of all, I'm going to remove the silk. The way to remove the silk, open your scissors to a gape, each side of the silk tight up against the fly, and gently push. Okay, now that we're at that situation, so what I do now, I'm going to varnish the rest of the fly, the head of the fly, I'm sorry, and I just dip my needle in the varnish and I just touch it. I just touch the head. I think that's pretty well okay. Okay, top on the varnish in case I knock it over, and 1 or 2 other little jobs to do on this fly. Number 1, clear the eye. Very important. Nothing more frustrating than when you're down the river. Stick an old hackle up through and draw it through, and that clears the eye. And before I position these wings, because this is a spent pattern, which was lying flat on the surface with its wings outstretched and its tail outstretched, I want to give it a flat profile. So I now go in and cut off some of these hackles. I cut them off level to make the fly flat. Don't need to do them all. That's most of them. And now I would normally wait a little longer until that varnish dries before trying to position these hackles. One or two there. It's not important because they're just legs. And you will see now the profile of the fly. You see the spent wings, how it lies like that? Can you see the body? The nice segmented body. You don't see much of the body, but that is the Lunn's particular fly, and I hope you picked up one or two tips on that. A little bit fiddly, but when there's a spent flies on the water, that's after they've laid their eggs, they drop on the water with their wings flat out. That is a very good pattern to use, especially if the natural fly is a reddish brown. Okay, I hope you picked up a few tips, and I thank you for watching.